clean out any kind of ragged. I want it to be able to clean out. This side's still a little bit cluttered. I want debris to be able to work its way through and not get trapped in there, but I don't want to trim the frog really short this way. This horse has already shed some of its frog. At this point, I'm not paying any attention to the lines. I just did that to see how far it was out before we started. Quite a bit of excess bar here. That itself can cause a lot of soreness if it gets too much of that. There's a little buildup of sole here. We'll take some of it, but to get the horse's foot short, you don't trim it from this direction. So when we observed this horse, this toe is actually longer than the other one. So it would appear like we need to trim more from the bottom to get it shorter, but that's not actually true. We need to bring the toe back, not trim it short that way. So you need to bring this horse's heels back and get him a little closer to his frog. Always start at the heel and work forwards. If you start at the toe and work your way back, you'll end up too short. So despite the fact that this horse's toe was really long, I trimmed nothing off his toe from the bottom. Again, just kind of a rough trim. We'll fine tune it later. I know I have to bring his toe back a long ways, so I'll just do some of it now to save on how much I have to do later. There.
What I noticed, Ross, was that you didn't trim a lot from the bottom, and yet it has such a long toe.
Right. So where a lot of people go wrong when they're trimming the horse's toe is long, but it's growing forward, not per se downward. So when I trimmed that other front foot, I only trimmed a little bit of the heel, never even touched the toe, yet the toe needs to be shortened up an inch or maybe more. So we're just going to move the toe back as opposed to trim it short from the bottom. And that's where people end up with a horse that gets sore, is because they try to shorten it up from the bottom and they have the sole way too short. The horse has no more protection. If you don't shoe him, he's going to be sore. He may even be sore even if you shoe him. But if you don't trim it from the bottom, there's a chance you can shorten the toe up that much and the horse can just go barefoot in it. We're going to shoe this horse because he has so much wrong with him. But if this horse didn't have a bunch of lameness and just needed to trim and get fixed up, I would trim his foot back that far and still leave him barefoot and he would probably be fine. So we're going to top dress his foot pretty much just the way you would any horse. So when you're in the position that I'm at and you look at the horse's cornet band, that tells you the shape of the coffin bone, which tells you the shape you should shape the foot. So this shape here should mimic this shape here. If you look from the side, there's a gap in there, that's flare. You should never have any flare. You gotta, if ever there's any flare, get rid of it. Flare is distortion of the hoof wall. The new foot grows to the weight-bearing surface. So if you leave your horse's foot all flared out and the toe run forward, that's where the new foot grows to, is that ugly foot that you left underneath there. If you trim it up to get rid of all the flare, bring the breakover back. The new foot grows to that new trim that you put on it, which doesn't have any flare in it. So actually stand back here and you look down to see if this surface is the same as this one. So the neat thing is all horses come with a built-in instruction manual as to how to shape their foot. Each horse is different, but each horse will tell you how it needs to be. So this is the foot that I chopped a bunch off with the nippers, because this was a foot that was way too far forward, but I didn't trim anything from the bottom. So there again, small amount of flare, more so on this side. Not too bad on the toe, a little bit. We look at this here, and there's a bump sticking out over there and one over here, and there's... Horses don't have bumps and straight lines and jagged edges on their cornet band, so there shouldn't be any in their hoof wall. And if you've looked at enough x-rays and then actually seen coffin bones at a horse's foot, they don't have real sharp corners and straight lines and whatever. They all have long curves to them, or they're rounded. So there's no reason your horse's foot should have straight edges on it or sharp corners. I'm not worried about going back to what I chopped off. I'm just getting rid of flare. We'll deal with the breakover at a later point. So there, that's just the basic rough trim without even using the COBIT to see where breakover and stuff is. That's just my starting point. We're going to put the COBIT back on, see how close my trim is to being where it needs to be, figure out exactly where our breakover is. We found we still have our mark from last time. Sometimes that disappears when in your trim, but we're fortunate that it's still there. Here, so we have our balance point, our center of balance. So that, we did some extensive studies, but the center of balance doesn't change from a long foot to the short trimmed foot, from a shod foot to an unshod foot. The center of balance doesn't move. It's a reference point that you can continually use. So here's where his breakover needs to be. At the back of the front slot. At the back of the rear slot is where the buttress of his heel needs to be. We still have center of balance. So we'll start with our buttress of heel. Pretty much bang on with what the COBIT told us. So when we shape our shoe, we'll have to set it back to here. If you were to leave this horse barefoot, you would round this toe off back to this point. But if we were going to leave this horse barefoot, we would have left the hoof wall longer here to give the horse something to walk on. This is a flat trim to shoe a horse, which is different than a barefoot trim. We put the COBIT on before we started just to illustrate how far out of balance the horse was. When I'm every day working on a horse, I do my rough trim first and then I put the COBIT on for the first time, just to save a little bit of time. This is the foot that he stands on. He's just like a little student here. He does really good on this foot. So the difference, even just the way he stood between one foot and the other, his other foot is the lame foot, which is why he doesn't want to stand on it as good. But that shows you, so buttress to heel is pretty much right on our mark, height of our frog, and this is where we'll set our shoe to. And we'll see that here in a little bit when I get his shoe shaped.